There are 42 living, human, breathing people that participate in the economy of Stardew Valley, or more specifically, Pelican Town. So I took the time to investigate every nook and cranny of the political and socioeconomic system of the city in order to answer one question. How is the local economy doing? The first thing that we're going to look at is the system of currency in Pelican Town and the inflation rates. The easiest way that you can think of Stardew money is in terms of 1 gold being 1 penny. And this would make sense because it means that a ride to Ginger Island is $10, a coffee is $3, you know. And that also makes sense considering that Stardew Valley is based off of Harvest Moon, which is a Japanese game. And in Japan, 100 yen is about $1, and that sounds good. Except the minimum wage in Pelican Town is 5 gold an hour, aka 5 pennies an hour. You gotta remember here, a Joja Cola is 15 gold, a beer is 400 gold, a bag of rice is 200, 5 gold an hour, and that's what Joja Mart is paying its employees, aka Sam and Shane, who live in our valley. There's even Robin, who will work hours a day non-stop building something for your farm for like 100 gold? So whether you're working for a company or you have your own business, prices or wages here are completely out of whack. And it just doesn't make sense, because how is a pub that sells beers for 400 gold able to stay in business when people are making piss poor punny? Whoa. How is this general store not bankrupt when it's selling mostly seeds and there's only one farmer in the entire valley? Well, it turns out that this bizarre economic behavior can be explained by one thing: the war. After you get back from the second year of your farm, so spoilers, you ready? Okay. After the second year of your farm, this guy named Kent comes back, and it turns out that he was missing because he was being kept as a prisoner of war. So there's this conflict happening between what's called the Ferngill Republic, which is where Stardew Valley is, and the Gotoro Empire, which is who held Kent captive for a year. And we know this because we see Vincent, Kent's son, and his wife talk about that and just his experience as a veteran. And then there's also books in the museum that you'll donate that kind of talk about it, some posters here and there. Apparently this war is at a stalemate and it's still happening, which would explain so much about why the prices or the wages are just so out of whack in Pelican Town. See, all the consumables like salads and beers, they're so expensive because the ingredients needed to make them are probably imported from elsewhere, and war usually means that isolated areas like Pelican Town don't get as many resources, or they charge a lot more to get those resources, and that's what makes certain items scarce. And that shortage is what leads to higher prices, sometimes insanely high prices. The overall effects of a war on an economy are usually pretty bad. You have an increased food shortage, usually rising inflation, greater risks of poverty, homelessness, all that fun stuff. But you do usually at least see the creation of more jobs, and that's the next thing that we're gonna look at. We're gonna look at unemployment. Now, the unemployment rate for any town is based off of the percent of people in an area who are willing and able to work. So when we calculate the unemployment rate, we're not gonna look at children, retirees, homemakers, or people who just don't want a job. So even though Pelican Town does have 42 inhabitants, we're only going to look at about 32 of those. Now, the town has 13 independent businesses. These are the characters responsible for running the general stores, the pub, clinic, refinery, farm, fishery, casino, office, carpentry business, museum, or otherwise ambiguous business. Outside of those businesses, we know that there's 20 people who have some type of job. Some of these are obvious, like Shane and Sam, who go to Joja Mart to work, or Lewis, who's the mayor. But even the people who you might think don't have jobs actually do. Alex runs an ice cream stand, Sebastian is a freelance programmer, Pam operates the bus, Abigail and Caroline are seen stocking shelves at Pierre's store, Maru works at the clinic, Leah is an artist, Penny is a tutor, Kent was/is in the army, Gil and Marlin work for the Miners Guild, and then we have the governor and a bouncer. So there in total we have 31 out of 32 NPCs having a job, which is incredible. So basically everyone but Linus has a job, which is okay, because that brings our unemployment rate to a grand total of 3.125%. Now, you might think that the lower the unemployment rate is, the better, right? Like a 0% unemployment rate is the best because it means that everybody's employed, but that's actually not the case. A 0% unemployment rate, or just one that's too low in general, is actually bad because it means that the labor market is inflexible, and workers couldn't quit their job and expect to be able to find a new one. It also leads to a decrease in productivity because it means that the market has reached a point where each new job won't create enough output to cover its cost. This is why in developed countries, an ideal employment isn't 100%, but actually 94 to 96%. And lucky for us, Linus single-handedly not having a job means that we have a 96.875% employment rate. And that's pretty baller. That's pretty good. But another thing that we have to look at is the government spending, which is pretty much just whatever the government is spending on basically to support the growth or the sustainability of a town. So in Stardew Valley, we mostly see this in the form of festivals and fairs. These events are meant to boost morale in the town, encourage business, which we see through all the vendors that pop up, and increase tourism. That last one is really important because tourism can be one of the biggest ways that towns gain money to then reinvest into growth. But we don't really see a whole lot of signs of tourism happening even with these fairs. You would think that more people would be coming in from all these nearby places, but none really do. We get some NPCs at some of the festivals, but not as much as you'd think there would be. Especially considering that the town has invested in things like a library and a museum. They haven't invested in schools yet, but you know, we'll get there. But there is a nearby island called Ginger Island, and you'd think that that would be a pretty hot spot for tourism. But I do think that it's actually a separate territory, so the money that we get from Ginger Island wouldn't be going to Pelican Town. We know that Ginger Island's a part of what's called the Fern Islands, and Pelican Town is a part of the region we call Stardew Valley. The Fern Islands is what also makes up Zuzu City, which Alex and Haley talk about having visited, Grampleton, which Penny, Clint, and Emily talk about, Castle Village, and Prairie Island. So I think it's safe to say that the tourism that happens in those more remote destination locations probably isn't helping the economy of Pelican Town. So the question becomes, how is the government funding these elaborate fairs and festivals without tourism? Well, you, the player, don't pay any taxes, so you could think that, oh, nobody in the village pays taxes, but I don't think that's true. Because of the war that's happening, it would make sense for farmers to be the ones that are tax exempt, and there's no way that this town isn't paying any taxes. So income taxes are the most likely way that these festivals are being funded, but we also know that the government can't be getting too much money from them because there's only 42 people in this town, many of which are making miserably low salaries. I also don't think there's any sales tax because most items are flat prices and the price that's shown is just what you buy them for. And I don't think there's any property taxes either since you don't pay any, unless there's some weird exception to that since you inherited your land. But the main reason that I don't think taxes are bringing in good income for the government is because of how much a reliance there is on the people to rebuild and fix basic infrastructure. Usually it would be taxes that pay for the infrastructure that's broken everywhere in Stardew Valley. The boulders that are blocking trade routes, the bus system, the docks, bridges, minecart systems, a bunch of bare necessities that you think a government in the middle of war would be prioritizing. So I really don't think that there could be that much tax money coming in. In an economically sound city, you think that Mr. Mayor Lewis would either increase taxes or just raise money somehow, but he just doesn't. And I think this could be due to a number of things. Number one, he doesn't think the town needs it, which we know is not true because having transportation and trade routes during war is super important. Or number two, he knows that prices are already super inflated because of the war, and people would become poor if he raised taxes, so he doesn't think it's smart to. Or most interestingly, number three, he knows that he wouldn't be reelected mayor if he raised taxes. Because remember, Mayor Lewis has ran uncontested for 20 years in the position of mayor. Which means that even through the war, even through the economic hardships, he has been riding on a comfortable government salary this whole time. But then you show up and you exemplify to this town a beautiful story of rags to riches. You fight off the corporation from taking over all the local businesses. You make your farm into this insane thing while the economy is collapsing. You do all of that, and Mayor Lewis does nothing. And by nothing, I mean nothing. He doesn't ever go into the office, he doesn't work from home, he just circles to the pub, goes around, visits people, and literally does nothing. The only real work that he does is just going and collecting the things that you put in the bin at the end of the day to sell. And I think he's aware of this too, because every time the governor comes to visit for the Luau Festival, he is on his best behavior and he makes sure that the image of Pelican Town is going strong. But little does the governor know, that could not be farther from the truth. It's shady. But what isn't shady is today's sponsor, GameMaker. GameMaker is a game development engine that lets you make high-quality games all by yourself. Personally, I've been using GameMaker for years now. I've watched it grow, and it's my favorite. Even if you've never touched game development, okay, let me just show you around. You can start by making a game from a template, which lets you study the fundamentals of a platformer, a top-down shooter, tower defense game, or a bunch of other options instead of starting off on a completely clean slate. Game development is just hard, and that's the reality of it, so having these templates is really nice when you're first starting out. There's also a ton of tutorials online as well as on the GameMaker website, so the learning curve is about as smooth as it can be. But once you have your template, you're able to easily set or change scripts to run on certain events, like a keyboard press or when the game first loads, and then attach art or physics to that logic. I'm a big fan of the modular design of that whole process. It makes it really easy to organize and keep track of everything. You never feel lost in folders or not sure what script is attached to what object. You can edit your sprites through the engine. As someone who's worked in front-end development, I'm just saying that the UI is really nice. The whole point of a good game engine is to organize and simplify things as much as possible so that you can create. And I love GameMaker because it literally does just that. With how big the community is and how many successful games have come out of it, it's safe to say that if you have discipline and a tool like this, you can make some pretty cool stuff. GameMaker is completely free to use for non-commercial games, so you can start learning how to make games today. And if you do want to sell your game with it down the road, it's a one-time fee and you can publish to all kinds of platforms. Download GameMaker for free using the link in the description. So GameMaker might be thriving, but the economy of Stardew Valley is not. Things so far are just not looking good in Pelican Town, and they look even worse when you look at the healthcare system and you also realize that there's no banks. Governments need banks because that's one of the main ways that you can get economic growth without inflation happening. It lets you control the money supply, or in the least better manage the flow of money in a region. But Pelican Town doesn't have any local bank, and there's no indication that the broader region of Stardew Valley has any kind of central bank. All the money that you accumulate throughout the game just stays in your pockets the entire time, millions of dollars worth. It's honestly a miracle that crime rates aren't higher, but that's a separate issue. The only time that the government does seem to take your money is when your character passes out in game. If it gets to be 2 AM, you run out of energy, or you lose all your health in combat, you get transported to Harvey's clinic, where it costs 10% of your gold up to a maximum of like 1,000 to bring you back to health. And this is pretty common in nations that do have what we call free healthcare, where it won't necessarily be free, but it'll be really cheap. But again, when we don't have a good income from taxes, where are we getting the money for the free healthcare from? There's just no way that in Pelican Town our 32 working villagers are paying for the work that Maru does in the labs or the care that Harvey gives you in the hospital. And that kind of makes sense because it's a town and it's not a state, right? We have a mayor, we don't have a governor. So on the bright side, this means that Pelican Town is cemented enough as a city to be getting some kind of support from the state or the greater province that it's a part of in the valley. So we're getting support, just not in the ways that the town really needs. And that's just weird, because yes, healthcare is obviously important, but so is the basic infrastructure that the player has to repair. So is the community center, so is dealing with the aging population, dealing with tourism, fighting the inflation rates, doing something about the minimum wage being 5 gold an hour, I don't know. It's just weird, and it doesn't make sense. So I have a theory. My theory is that Mayor Lewis is lying to the governor about the economic health of Pelican Town in order to hang on to his job. Which means that Pelican Town is not receiving the economic support that it really needs without the help of the player. When Mayor Lewis speaks to the governor at the Lao Festival, he only speaks fondly of things, and the governor every year talks about buying a vacation home in the town. And clearly that indicates to me that he is ignorant of all of the issues happening in Pelican Town. He doesn't know anything about the rapid inflation, the low wages, poor investments, deteriorating infrastructure, aging population, or everything else that we talked about. Unless the governor is used to it, because all the towns in Stardew Valley are experiencing the same issues. And that would mean a much worse picture is in store for the economic health of the entire state. But at the end of the day, the person who really needs to step up and do their job is Mayor Lewis, okay? I have an unfathomable amount of beef with this man for his sheer ineptitude. And for a town of people that are scrambling together, that have such a tight-knit community, something so beautiful, they need a leader. And I think that this is the opportunity for the player to take hold of the economy and take hold of that mayor position. It's time for a coup. We're gonna overthrow Lewis. If you really do want to fix the economy though, the best thing you can do is subscribe. It'll resolve world hunger, fix all the economic crises in the entire world. Just the click of a button. It's crazy. Devs haven't patched this one yet. So anyway, that's all from me. I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a lovely rest of your day. Bye-bye!